If you're a Trump supporter, today is a big day for you because your candidate won. Trump won the election. Congratulations. I know this was a long election season. I think we can all probably agree that shorter election seasons would be really, really nice. I don't think anyone who was voting for Trump 2 years ago changed their vote going into this election. I would say the same thing about Kamala Harris supporters. So maybe in the future we can work towards having shorter election seasons. But regardless, once again, mad congratulations. That was a lot of work, that was a lot of energy, and you pulled it off. So well done. Your candidate is now the president. Today I want to watch a video of a woman who is obviously having a very bad day around the fact that Donald Trump is going to be the 47th president of the United States. So before I say anything else, let's quickly watch the video, and then from there we'll get into it.
I was just walking down the street to go get my medication because I'm out and I need it for today. And I saw a woman walking her 2 kids, and she had this look on her face. And I looked at her, we made eye contact, and we both kind of nodded. Like we were both just devastated. And you could just tell in her eye.
Okay, so let's talk about 2 things here. The first is, I don't think it's any coincidence that she starts off the video by saying that she's walking to go get her medication because she's out and she needs it. The type of person who talks about medication in this way is usually someone who's mentally ill, and I think the fact that we can look at her bangs and just understand her general demeanor, I don't think it would be that much of a stretch of the imagination to say that this person likely has some mental issues. And it's not because she's conducting herself inappropriately on camera. Like, all she's doing is crying. Is it the most tasteful thing in the world to post yourself to the internet crying? No, probably not. But a lot of people do it, and it's considered to be pretty socially accepted at this point. I think the deeper issue is, again, talking about the medication at the beginning of a video like this, because there was a study that came out recently where I think like 50% of Gen Zers, I hope it's that, I don't want to be making stuff up, but I think it's around 50% of Gen Zers believe that their mental illness is a big part of their self-identity rather than something that does not define them. And to me, that's a pretty scary statistic. That's a pretty scary study, because if you're going around in your life thinking that your mental illness literally is part of your personality, it is integral as to who you are, that doesn't give you a lot of power in life. It doesn't allow you to show up in difficult situations with courage, with tenacity. In fact, most of the time, it causes you to be of the mindset that things happen to you and nothing ever good comes your way, and you are simply a subject of the world. You're essentially a victim. And again, that's a shitty way to live. And again, I don't think it's any coincidence that she starts off the video this way, because the rest of the video is her crying, literally like weeping on screen about the outcome of an election. And I think that's bizarre, because ultimately who the president of the United States is doesn't really affect your life in any meaningful way. The best proof of this is the fact that we just had Joe Biden over the last 4 years. And, you know, I think a lot of people would take a look at the economy and say, oh, things got worse there, immigration, things got worse there. But ultimately, does the president really have the power to do anything about those things? Is the economy dependent on the president? The answer is no. It's dependent on market forces. It's dependent on international trade. It's dependent on Congress making and enforcing laws. It's immigration has more to do with like state security. And when it comes to federal stuff, again, that lies to Congress, not the executive. And I know we all kind of understand that. And the only reason I say this is because at this point the election is over, and I think we can all sort of remove ourselves from the mental game of politics, where I think a lot of us probably say things that we consider to be a little bit untrue in the back of our head, but because it scores us political points in the moment, we just kind of roll with it, even though there are some intellectual inconsistencies with the things that we're saying out loud. And again, that's no judgment. It's just, I think that's the nature of politics. I think anyone who really participates in politics in a meaningful way understands that. And as a result, it's just the way that the game is played. However, getting back to this girl, I don't think her crying in this way is a very powerful way to conduct your life. And I think it's problematic that a video like this does well in liberal circles, because it encourages other liberals to basically surrender their entire life to an external locus of control, something outside of them. They literally let something outside of them that is nowhere within their physical vicinity, that has no real bearing on their life, to upset them to this degree. And I think the reason people do this type of thing is because, again, they feel powerless in their own lives. They perpetually feel like victims. They perpetually feel as though, again, their mental illness defines them. And as a result, they have no power with anything. So when things happen out here that they ultimately don't have any control over, outside of them going and voting, which, I'm sure this girl did. But outside of that, the election isn't up to her. So in my mind, if this was in my life, if something like this happened, I'd be like, oh man, that's a bummer. That's not who I voted for. I wanted someone else to win. But life is life. Let's continue forward. I'm going to continue making my life happen as well as I can, regardless of who's president. And as you can see, regardless of which country I'm in, I'm trying to make the best out of my life. That's power. That's courage. That's the ability to move forward in life in a way that gives you unstoppable momentum. And I don't say that to toot my own horn. I hope that you are identifying with what it is that I'm saying here as well, because this applies to you. Being able to look at an election, let's say, you're a Trump supporter and you saw that Kamala Harris won this election. I kind of imagine that you would think to yourself, okay, well, that's a bummer, but life is life. It's time to move on. Focus on the things that I do have control over and try and make those things better. Because you're the type of person who understands that not everything is in your control. But the things that are in your control, you are able to show up every single day and put energy, passion, focus into those things to make not just your life better, but the lives of the people around you better as well. I would like to see a culture based around those values, based around that worldview, as opposed to the worldview of the woman that we just saw in the video. Because again, it's sad to see another human being cry. Like, I think if you saw this person in real life, I don't think you would sit there and laugh and be like, oh, ha, ha, you're such an idiot. Like, you would probably have a little bit more feeling for someone who's just bawling their eyes out, regardless of whether or not they had piercings, than you would if you see them on your phone screen. I know it's a different psychological experience with someone in person versus on the phone screen. It's easier to laugh at them on the phone screen, etc. But I think you'd probably see them in person and say, okay, well, that's pretty sad. And I think if you were to try and talk to this person, sort of understanding that she is coming from a place where she views mental illness as part of her core identity, so much so that she chooses to start off a video talking about her medication and then goes into a 50-second rant about how devastated she is that something outside of her control happened, especially when that thing really has no real effect on her life. Unless Trump ends up being a fascist dictator, which I don't think there's really any huge indication that is going to happen in any real meaningful way. You know what I mean? So I guess this is what I would say all in all. When you're dealing with this type of person, if you know someone like this in the video in your real life, you have two options here. You can either really try and understand where this person is coming from and to ask them why they're so afraid, what it is that they're so afraid of. And they might say lack of reproductive care or anything like that, but see if you can get even farther below that. Ask them what are they literally feeling in their body? Is it some sort of pain in their stomach? Is it a fear in their chest? That's the kind of thing that you want to have a conversation with this person about, because then they can actually start to have a conversation about what's going on in their body, and even start to have a conversation about maybe where in their history, where in their previous experience, something else happened that upset them so much that they felt like they didn't have control over. And maybe Trump getting elected is really just a manifestation of that previous pain that they felt around XYZ situation where they didn't have control and they felt afraid. You start talking to someone on those terms, they're going to start coming around to you as someone that they trust, and that's the way to actually get people on your side of the political aisle, instead of yelling at them, instead of laughing at them, instead of calling them stupid. So again, that's option one. Option two is you cut this type of person out of your life forever. And the second option is also totally valid. I've been there. I've had to do this type of thing with a number of people, and they were very painful separations because these were the main people in my life. But the question that I had to ask myself at a certain point is, do I want to continue surrounding myself with this type of person? Because this type of behavior, this type of worldview, even though it's not my worldview, it's theirs, but even though I'm around that type of worldview so often, as a result of that, it actually slows me down in my life. It makes me more depressed. It makes me less hopeful about the future. And when I asked myself that question, I just realized that the answer was no. I wanted to be able to move forward with momentum, to create a life that I was excited about. And I think if you go with that second option and you cut these types of people out of your life, which again is a totally valid response, I would say the best thing to do is to cut them out and not view them as an enemy. Don't view them as subhuman. Don't view them as a piece of trash. View them as a person who simply, is where they are in life. They only have certain emotional skills to process life that you might not have. And, what else do you say about that? Can you really yell at someone for having a shittier childhood than you did because they don't have as strong of an ability to master their emotions, to keep control of their emotions in the moment because of the fact that their parents probably treated them like shit as children and they just didn't develop that part of their brain? Can you really yell at someone about that? Can you really think that they're subhuman trash as a result? I would say no. I don't think that's a reason to keep people around in your life. I think having healthy boundaries and really determining for yourself the type of person that you want to be around is totally valid for you, and you should make a choice for you that feels really, really good. But again, if you separate yourself from this type of person, don't do it with fire and anger and flames. Do it with empathy, do it with understanding. Because in the long run, if you separate yourself from people like this, and you do so in such a way where they don't have to view you as the evil person, as the absolute enemy, human vermin trash, and hopefully, with time, understand why you made the decision that you did, and perhaps they will then be able to empathize with the fact that you just didn't want to get held back. You were focused and dedicated to your own goals, and that was more important to you than trying to surround yourself with people who were holding you back. Whether or not people ever see things that way, I don't know. That's something that has yet to play out in my life. But I think ultimately, if we can figure out a way to exist with one another in society, even outside of the realm of just individual to individual, but from party to party, from liberal to conservative, from atheist to religious, it doesn't matter. If we can figure out a way to have healthy boundaries between both parties and to continue living our lives and not feel like we have to fully endorse the other side, but understand that the other side is indeed, a human being, or is comprised of human beings, and that they have their own experiences, that they are simply where they are in life, and as a result, not hate them, because everyone has emotions, everyone has different emotional skills, and just recognizing that, I think we will have a country that is happier, that is healthier, and a citizenry that can accomplish so much more because our emotional energy is put towards things that actually matter, things that can drive our country forward, as opposed to just constantly saying that the other side is only comprised. So again, this is how I think it's best to view liberal women who are crying as a result of the election. If you want to check out how I think it's best to deal with angry women who are screaming into cell phones as a result of the election, if you'd like to see how I think it's best to approach different types of women who scream into cell phones as a result of the outcome of the election, then check out this video here.